And LeMay got the Boeing people together who had improvised the hose system, and he said, we got to do something better than this. And he said, now we got the B-47 coming into the system. They're going to replace all of these B-29s at 3 times the speed. So we need a tanker that's going to be bigger and faster, and we wanted to find out, we want to find a different way, and we want you to find it. You're Boeing, you're big enough to do it. And so they're the ones that developed the telescoping boom. And the telescoping boom would be attached mechanically to the bottom of the tanker. All right, and it was about, got a pin somewhere I can show you? Yeah. And they attached one in approximately this position here. And it was attached to the fuel system in here, but it also had a reel attached at about this position. And there was a tanker operator, we call him the boom operator, who would lower the boom like this at about this position. And of course, the fuel's coming right out of the belly here. And the bomber, we had to learn how to fly up into where the nozzle was on the tanker. That's where the fuel came out of the nozzle. And we learned how to fly up into it with some really highly qualified test pilots proofread this system. And we wound up with specially attached tankers and bombers. The B-25 went out. This was nothing but a I don't know what description to give it. It was the trial mechanism. Finally, we wound up with the first non-bomber version of the tanker. Was the first Boeing, the 380 they called it, which happened to be also the first version of the Boeing jet transport. They had jet engines on them, had a lot of capability. All this had to be trial though, and eventually we did have, when they started building them, they had an agreement with the Air Force that for every 2 tankers, Boeing tankers, called the KC-135, for every 2 KC-135 tankers, they would have to produce 1 without the boom as Boeing's first jet-propelled airliner. And that's the only way they would do it, because the Air Force was financing this whole thing. And a lot of people don't realize that. And so in very late 1956, so we had to live with a hose until then, we finally started receiving some of these first jet-propelled tankers that held 4 times what the old original tankers were. And also they started dribbling out one at a time to all the airlines, literally one at a time, so that they could learn how to fly them. Because they had no jet-propelled airplanes, not a single airline, because the British Comet had blown up in the air, and there was nothing in the world but these beautiful KC-135s. They'd give, for every 2 of these, 1 airline would get one of those. And that's why the whole thing was developed. They're just now, this all happened in 56 and 57, and they built those jet tankers up until 59, and they're almost all still flying. And they just started flying the first replacement airplane, which is called the KC-46. Marvelous airplane, much bigger than the KC-135, much faster pumps, a way of getting gas into fighters and bombers, even cargo airplanes now. Even Air Force One has an air refueling capability. They can stay in the air until they all rot. Yeah, as long as the fuel, as the food holds out, they can just stay in the air forever.
Bill, excuse me for interrupting. You're telling a great story, so keep going. But my question is, I'm watching the planes even right now, kind of landing at, San Francisco. They don't let them get that close together because of the turbulence.
Well, of course.
Describe what it's like to pull up behind another huge airplane. Please.
All right.
Thank you.
We have aerodynamically with all large airplanes, we have an envelope. And as long as you stay into the design envelope, a piece of the air, so to speak, and come into, you don't fly into it like this. You fly into it from down here, gradually climbing and gradually going forward until you contact the boom would be hanging down here. And we have a, let me get my 52 out of here. We have an air refueling receptacle in all of the air refueling airplanes. And I'll show you on the 52 where it is. I've got a huge version of this, but I only brought the small one. But right here,
I have to hold it up a little.
yeah, okay, right here in back of the cockpit, right here, it would be where the light gray turns into the dark gray. And there is a receptacle there, the air refueling receptacle. And what you have to do is to open those doors. They're clamshell doors, and when you're given the signal, the pilot up here with the co-pilot will read the checklist, and they'll get to it, and the crew member who has the air refueling switch, door switch, as close to him as possible, will simply flip the switch, and the receptacle right in here will go flip, flip, and the doors open up, and there are toggle switches in there. And the boom operator who's sitting up here in the tanker, he will bring the nozzle in closer and closer and closer. And as it touches these toggle switches here, of course you're doing, 500 miles an hour up here, both airplanes. And it sounds very uncomfortable or very dangerous, but it isn't at all. And he slips those, his toggle switches right up, or his receptacle right up to the toggle switches, and when he hits them, they'll close automatically. And then as soon as he looks, the boom operator will make a careful check. He has excellent visibility. He's sitting right about up in here. And he can tell whether or not there are any leaks anywhere. And if there are no leaks, he will say contact. And as soon as he says contact, all the main switches are turned on for full fuel pressure. And the fuel goes into the bomber from the receptacle here at a rate of 6,000 pounds a minute. So in a 20-minute contact, you can offload 120,000 pounds of fuel. We do everything by pounds. Gallons means nothing. And so now it's become so common now that we have fighters and cargo airplanes and bombers and Air Force One. They can all refuel in the air, which extends your mission. That's the only way we can get to Russia or any place else. So anyway, it's been a long time getting there. The first hoses started showing up just as I got to Roswell, right? And no more hoses are in use anywhere. They may be going on in some other third world country, who cares, but we don't use them anymore. Even the Navy has switched to what we have, and it's all done now. It's a beautiful mechanical system. We have very, very little trouble with it. It's practically foolproof. We did have one very serious accident over Spain in I'll say 65, but I'm not real sure of it. I've got all that at home. And it was on a Chrome Dome mission. Chrome Dome was one of the three missions where we had bombers in the air with H-bombs in them ready to go to Russia. And this was a Chrome Dome mission flying over Spain, and nobody knows for sure to this day what happened, but the tanker ran into the bomber. Both airplanes exploded, and 4 of the H-bombs were tossed out of the bomber, and they all landed on a beach at southeastern Spain. Portugal, southeastern Portugal. And because at that time Portugal was a NATO country and Spain wasn't. And those 4 H-bombs were laid out on the beach and in the close water, which was a huge international incident. Several people were killed. Both airplanes were destroyed. They went over there and located, using instrumentation, they located all 4 of those H-bombs. And nobody died of there's a phrase for it, but nobody died because of the effects of the bomb. A couple of them cracked, but didn't explode. But some crew members died, crew members in the airplanes. And it's highly been publicized, and you can call it up on a computer and read all about it. But that was real bad. That was the worst air refueling accident we ever had. And nobody knows for sure exactly what happened. But one of the airplanes lost an engine or more. Well, the 52, we have 8 of them, and the tanker had 4 of them. So we're not exactly sure about what happened, but there was a disengagement of the energy between the tanker and the bomber, the receiver. And that was very dangerous, and a lot of bad press for a SAC all over the place. Never had another one like that, but that was the worst one by far.